Hello! In the future, the American economy collapses, unemployment rates reach record highs, and crime spirals out of control. Prisons are now run by private corporations who use them for profit. One of them, located on Terminal Island, broadcasts live gladiatorial fights, in which the inmates fight to the death. The new Coliseum attracts millions of viewers, but soon they get bored and demand more. Thus, Death Race is born. The prisoners take their seats in cars that have been specially modified to make them the perfect murder weapons. For greater effect, the navigator's place is taken by beautiful girls who are brought from a neighboring women's prison, specifically for this purpose.
Good girl.
Of course, very few people make it to the finish line, but whoever survives this meat grinder on wheels will get a chance to walk free. Two armored and heavily armed cars rush to the finish line of Death Race. The first one is driven by the fan favorite wearing a leather mask, nicknamed Frankenstein. His navigator, a girl named Case, is urgently putting out the fire in the interior of the car after yet another attack. She advises the guy to surrender, or the car will explode.
You better drop back in the
last lap. He can witness. Why don't this son of a just die?
The experienced Machine Gun Joe, who is chasing them, has already lost his navigator in the firefight. All of Frankenstein's weapons are out of ammo, so he drops some of the car's armor to take out Joe. The heavy metal shield crashes into the opponent's windshield, tearing an impressive chunk off the hood, but the car is still running, and Joe takes aim at his opponent's vulnerable fuel tank. With 400 meters to the finish line, Case ejects from the car, unwilling to die for the win. Frank goes all the way. A rocket blows up Frankenstein's car, and it crosses the finish line flying. The fate of the winner, who is engulfed in flames, remains unknown. A few days later, Jensen Ames is spending his workday at the steel mill. He has served his time and is now living a peaceful life with his family. However, now he will have to work even harder to feed his family. The plant is closing down, and the bosses are not going to pay the employees their full wages.
You wanted cash? There's a fee. You want a check instead?
Soon as a company's out of business, not exactly.
A police squad arrives to control the disgruntled workers. When the men attempt to confront them, the cops open fire with rubber bullets and pounce on the workers with batons. Jensen tries to help his wounded friend and gets injured himself. The man is lying on the ground, trying to recover, and one of the cops swoops down on him. In a rage, Jensen fights back and takes away his baton. He knocks out two policemen with powerful blows and invites the others to try their luck as well. He returns home late at night, where he is met by his beloved wife, Susie. She supports her husband in spite of his work problems. Their outburst of passion is interrupted by the cry of their baby daughter from the bedroom. Jensen calms down the girl and goes to the bathroom, unaware that a masked killer has entered the house. He kills Susie, and when Jensen finds her body, the criminal knocks him out as well. Before he leaves, the perpetrator puts a kitchen knife in the man's hand and makes a gunshot gesture. Jensen is later found by the police and charged with the murder of his wife. 6 months later, on a rainy day, Jensen is taken to a prison on Terminal Island to serve his sentence. A guard named Ulrich inspects the newcomer, then douses him with ice-cold water from a hose. Then another guard gives him a couple of painful blows, so that the prisoner knows what kind of place he found himself in. Jensen's cellmates are clearly up to no good either. Ulrich leaves the man at their mercy, but he is in for a disappointment. As soon as the guard goes away, Jensen easily knocks out all three of them. The next morning, Jensen is eating breakfast in the dining hall. He is spotted by a group of inmates, Coach, Gunner, and Lists, who recognize Jensen as a former famous race car driver whose career has been derailed by a past prison sentence. Suddenly, all the chatter in the dining hall dies down as Pachinko and his gang enter the room. They single out Jensen and provoke him into a fight by spitting in his food and calling him a murderer of women and children. Without waiting to be attacked, the man confronts the thugs, but the fight is quickly interrupted by guards with machine guns. Ulrich takes Jensen to the warden, Claire Hennessy. He warns him that Pachinko is a death race participant and that anyone who touches the racer will be severely punished. Hennessy greets Jensen. She asks about his past life as a racer and tells him about Frankenstein, who was the audience's favorite. Unfortunately, he died on the operating table after an explosion in the last race. But people watched the show mainly because of him, and since he wore a mask to hide his scars from past car crashes, he can be replaced with another racer, thus continuing the legend.
He moves them, inspires them, and in this world that's not so easy to come by.
The woman offers Jensen to put on the mask and play the part of the deceased Frankenstein. The man refuses, suspecting that there's a catch, but he is also told that if he finishes first in the death race 5 times, he will be released. The offer sounds even more tempting, since Frank, as they call the guy for short, has already won 4 races, so Jensen only has to repeat his success once. Jensen still feels uneasy about the offer, but the prospect of a life sentence in this hellhole is even less appealing to him. In addition, Hennessy threatens him with solitary confinement to keep him from revealing her secret, and so Jensen becomes the new Frankenstein. Soon, he is introduced to the crew that services Frank's car. It's the same trio who were talking about Jensen in the cafeteria. Each racer has his own team of mechanics, and no one helps each other. Only Frank's team and a couple of security guards will know that there is another person under the mask. Hennessy will keep a close eye on it, as her company has suffered huge losses during the 6 months of the star racer's absence. In addition, to make the race more entertaining, she has spent the last month building something special in a closed wing where no one is allowed. The team shows Jensen the Monster, a modified Mustang fastback that belonged to Frankenstein. It is packed with 850 horsepower, plus nitrous oxide for extra acceleration. There's bulletproof glass and steel plates for protection. The most powerful of those is the rear shield, which is optimistically called the Tombstone. It's the one that Frank detached in his last-ditch attempt to defend himself from Joe's attacks, and paid for it with his life. The arsenal of weapons consists of machine guns, smoke screens, napalm, and oil, which make the pursuer's job much more difficult. The ammunition is only loaded right before the race, so that the prisoners don't think of attacking the guards and escaping. In addition, Hennessy can block the weapons remotely, and getting off the island will be almost impossible with only one narrow bridge leading to land, which will be jammed with police cars and helicopters at the first signs of escape. Jensen asks about his predecessor, and is informed that he has taken about 20 racers to their graves. The average death rate of each race is about 60%, and no one has ever won 5 times yet. The race will consist of 3 stages. During the first 2, it is advisable to get rid of as many opponents as possible to get to the finish line faster than everyone else in the 3rd stage. On the day of the race, Jensen will meet Case, his navigator.
They get bussed in from the women's facility upstate.
It's all about ratings, fast cars, pretty women.
The exception is Machine Gun Joe, who is paired with men. His navigators die like flies, and the girls are saved for the other racers. Lists also tells Jensen about other strong competitors, whom he should be able to recognize. 14K, the heir to a Chinese mobster and a graduate from a prestigious college. Hector Grimm, a clinical psychopath who worships Hennessy as the incarnation of the Indian goddess of death. Pachinko, head of the Aryan Brotherhood. And Travis Colt, a former NASCAR superstar with a nasty temper who drove into a crowd of people completely drunk. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by Joe and his crew. They have heard that Frank won't make it to the race because of injuries, and ask about the rookie, whom Coach introduces as the new mechanic. Joe tries to get a rouse out of Jensen, and leaves a message for Frankenstein threatening to finish what he started. Hennessy is good at keeping secrets, and the racer really has no idea that he's already sent his longtime rival to the afterlife. At this moment, a car brings in several inmates who have been allowed to do work outside the prison. Jensen notices bracelets with a tracking device on their wrists. Later, he realizes that he saw the same bracelet on his wife's killer. The day of the first stage of the race arrives. Jensen secretly disguises himself as Frankenstein and goes out to the audience, causing excitement among the spectators and anxiety among the competitors. Coach advises him not to talk to the other drivers because Frank has never talked to them either. The bus with the girls arrives, and the prisoners can't contain their approval, exploding with shouts and compliments. The guards contain their frenzy. Case gets in the car with Jensen. She's aware that the real Frank is dead, and the windows of the car are made of one-way mirrored glass, so Jensen takes off his mask for the race.
Better looking than the last Frank. A few crashes to change that.
Hennessy receives the report that the participants are ready to begin, and Death Race goes live. The announcer advertises the subscription fee, $99 for the first stage, and $250 for all 3. The warden hopes to reach 45 million viewers today. You can do the math. Jensen asks Case why she's in jail, and she confesses that she killed a policeman, but she didn't kill him for how he did his job. He died for being a horrible husband. Coach talks to the racers on the radio and warns them that Hennessy is blocking everyone's guns until the second lap, and there will be 3 in total. The race begins, and the killer cars rush forward, trying to push each other off the track. Jensen gets spun around, but he handles the car perfectly and quickly recovers without losing much speed. Cass knows what she's doing too, and tells the driver where to turn to take a shortcut. Through this maneuver, they end up in first place, overtaking Joe in his Jeep. The rival continues the chase, and a fierce competition ensues between them. The team advises Jensen not to fight head-on, but to play it smart. The second lap begins, and Hennessy activates the swords and shields, the special hatches on the ground, which the cars must drive over with all four wheels to gain access to the arsenal of weapons. The shields unlock smoke, napalm, and oil, while the swords are responsible for machine guns and rocket launchers. In addition, there are skulls, hatches that open deadly traps. When the experienced Grim comes under fire from a pursuer, he activates one of them and scores another life taken. Afterward, he takes on Joe, and the latter loses control of the car riding over the oil and drops to last place in the standings. But Grim doesn't get to celebrate the victory for long. 14K pulls ahead and drops spikes that puncture the racer's tires. Grim's car spins in the air, and the Chinese knocks him out of the race for good with a precisely launched missile. The injured madman climbs out of the wrecked car and onto the track, claiming to have defeated death itself. Joe proves otherwise by speeding over Grim in a controlled skid. The dramatic moment of the murder is shown to the audience in a close-up. Meanwhile, Jensen manages to activate his machine gun, but it jams immediately. Without thinking twice, Case unbuckles and climbs out the window to fix the weapon. The navigator of a nearby car climbs out as well, firing a barrage of bullets at the vulnerable girl. Jensen is shocked by his partner's suicidal maneuver and swerves the car desperately, shielding her from enemy fire. Case manages to finish what she started and returns to her seat. Bullets fly in all directions, and Coach saves List from death by pinning him closer to the ground. Jensen steals a shield from under Colt's nose, but the protective gadgets don't work for some reason.
No smoke, no oil, no napalm. Again?
It seems that this is what caused the death of the previous driver of the monster, and it is becoming more and more suspicious. Meanwhile, the racers continue to attack the leading car, especially since defeating Frank will earn them extra publicity and respect. This time, Colt is on his tail. Tombstone is protecting Jensen for now, but it won't last to the finish line. The racer has to improvise. He commands Case to manually unscrew the napalm canister and hook it to the passenger seat. The girl then climbs into Jensen's lap and activates the catapult, spraying their pursuers with the incendiary fluid. Colt is now sitting on a powder keg, and Case ignites it with a well-aimed throw of a lighter. Joe crashes into the opponent, leaving him no chance of survival. It's another spectacular moment that makes Hennessy crack a satisfied grin. They've broken their viewership records. Joe takes a shortcut, and Pachenko pulls up close to Jensen. He shows him the painfully familiar gunshot gesture, but Jensen doesn't have time to react because Joe, who appears from an ambush, flies into him. The finish line is just a short distance away, and Monster crosses at last among the 6 surviving racers. The second stage of the race begins in 14 hours, and the mechanics set about repairing the cars. Monster's team finds that all the guns are in good working order, and it remains a mystery why they did not work during the race. Jensen, meanwhile, can only think of Pachenko's gesture. He goes to Hennessy and tells her to go screw herself, refusing to participate in the next stage. He realizes that she was behind the murder of his wife because she wanted an experienced driver for the race. Hennessy orders the guards to leave her one-on-one with Jensen, and then shows the man the pictures of the foster parents who took his young daughter from the orphanage. Jensen has to play along if he wants a chance to see her again. Besides, he's eager to get back at Pachenko, so he agrees to continue the race. Jensen leaves, taking the picture of his daughter and ripping off the face of her foster father. Coach notices this and puts 2 and 2 together. Jensen asks why the man doesn't have a number on his clothes that all the inmates are supposed to wear. Coach replies that he was eligible for parole 3 years ago, but couldn't bring himself to walk out the prison gates. He chose not to face the world that had changed too much while the man was serving his sentence. Coach doesn't say what he went to prison for, but he's very surprised to hear the reason for Jensen's life sentence.
You, the way you looked at her, couldn't do that if you'd killed her mother.
Jensen hints that the guy is right, and that it was all orchestrated by Hennessy, who was looking for a new Frankenstein. Later that night, Joe puts new scars on his face, thus marking the drivers he has killed. Jensen and Lists are working on the car when Pachenko walks past them. The man gets distracted and follows him, but the rival team spots him in time and takes him hostage. Pachenko throws a couple of powerful punches at him before Jensen accuses him of killing Susie. The scumbag doesn't feel remorse for what he's done, then takes a huge wrench to finish Jensen off. He doesn't care about Hennessy, who needs a racer, but he is stopped by Lists, who stabs him in the back with a pin. The mechanic gets immediately beaten up for this, but Jensen seizes the moment and frees himself from the hold. He knocks out Pachenko's henchman and attacks the killer. His rage knows no limits, and the man is about to finish off the scoundrel who has ruined his life. But then Pachenko confesses that it was Hennessy along with Ulrich who forced him to commit the crime. He begs not to kill him, but Jensen no longer cares and swings a huge pipe. Pachenko is saved by Ulrich, who immobilizes Jensen with a stun gun. The next day before the second stage, Pachenko again teases Jensen with the killer's gesture. This time, the racer doesn't fall for the provocation. He lets the 5 rivals drive far ahead and enters into a tunnel to interrogate Case. If she lies to him, Jensen threatens to eject the girl straight into the ceiling of the building. He wants to know what role the girl played in Frank's death. Case confesses that she was the one who had blocked the gun.
I didn't kill him. He wouldn't quit. I just wanted to make sure he didn't win.
Hennessy promised to release the girl if she prevented Frank from earning his 5th win. And at last night's race, Case had a mission to hold Jensen back too, to keep the suspense. The driver is satisfied with the answers and accelerates, easily catching up with his rivals. He turns Joe's car around so that he doesn't get in the way of dealing with Pachenko once and for all. Ulrich and Hennessy are eagerly anticipating the spectacle. Jensen ignores the team's advice and activates the offensive arsenal on the hood, despite driving ahead of Pachenko. But Jensen has thought it all through and turns the car around to attack his opponent, continuing to drive in reverse. He suddenly turns around again and blows smoke into the enemy's face, causing him to fly into the concrete barrier. The wounded Pachenko gets out of the overturned vehicle, and Jensen stops the car despite the ongoing race to snap his neck in front of millions of viewers. Joe wants to get at his vulnerable rival, but his navigator makes a mistake, and the racer throws him out right in the middle of the track. The new companion is shoved into the cursed passenger seat against his will. Hennessy decides that this is the right moment to reveal the surprise she has been preparing all this time. A huge tanker truck called Dreadnought. It quickly catches up with the drivers, killing 2 with a volley of powerful weapons. The truck takes advantage of the exits inaccessible to other drivers to always remain in a good position to attack. The Dreadnought clings to 14K's car, killing its navigator, and then the driver himself with a shot from the tank turret. The only ones left are Joe and Jensen, and the latter decides to join forces with his rival to stay alive. With the help of his team, he contacts the guy over the radio, and they clamp the Dreadnought between their cars. They have to sacrifice yet another of Joe's navigators to do this, after which the racers activate the skull hatch by driving over it from both sides at the same time. The trap emerges right in front of the truck. With a loud clatter, the Dreadnought is torn to pieces and explodes. The second stage of the race is over, and now all that remains is a duel between Jensen and Joe. The rivals meet at the workshop, and Joe notices that the mechanic's voice is suspiciously similar to Frank's. He figures out who is hiding behind the mask. Meanwhile, Ulrich and Hennessy discuss that Jensen is dangerous, and it's time to take him out. Frankenstein must not win his 5th race, and it's time to pass his mask on to the next lucky guy. To do this, Ulrich plants a bomb under Jensen's car, while Hennessy distracts everyone with a pompous speech about how death race is the only thing that the dregs of society in her prison are good for. Jensen and Joe realize that they are being manipulated and will not be allowed to walk free alive. Back at the workshop, Jensen and Coach devise a plan that will put a spoke in the wheel of the ruthless warden. While they are attaching an extra fuel tank to the monster, Jensen goes to have a word with Joe. While Jensen is changing into Frank's clothes, Hennessy visits him to hand over the already signed papers that grant him release in case he wins. She also offers the guy to stay in the prison and continue racing under Frankenstein's mask. Understandably, Jensen is eager to go free because of his daughter. But what if she's better off in foster care than with a father who's been accused of killing her mother?
Are you really daddy material? Or deep down, are you something else?
The cunning manipulator tries to frame such an act of self-sacrifice as a display of selfless paternal love. And it seems that Jensen doubts himself for a second. Can he possibly be a sensitive and affectionate father after all he's been through? He puts the papers in his pocket and heads to the car. Case admits that Hennessy has ordered her to stop Jensen again, but the girl will not obey her. As soon as the race begins, Ulrich takes control of the hatches to ensure that only Joe gets to use them. Joe opens fire on Jensen, turning the tombstone into a sieve. Case urgently extinguishes the fire that is erupting in the car. Jensen decides to launch the now useless defense plate at the pursuer, just like his predecessor did, but Joe easily dodges the familiar trick. To make the race last longer, Hennessy lets Jensen activate the defense hatch, but Joe launches a missile into the ground, destroying it. However, Monster is still in the lead, and Ulrich is ready to activate the bomb if things don't go as planned. Joe fires his powerful new missiles, and Jensen dodges them, but it turns out to be a trick. The explosion destroys the wall, which has been vulnerable to attack after the previous stages of the race. Jensen and Joe leap through the hole and rush to the bridge to escape.
You gave that bitch a good show, huh?
Enraged, Hennessy interrupts the broadcast and activates the bomb, but Coach and the team only laugh at this pathetic attempt. They have thoroughly inspected the monster and disarmed the explosive device. The racers make it to the bridge, but the cops are closing in, so it's time to use the extra fuel tank. Jensen launches it at the chasers, causing an explosion and a massive crash. Meanwhile, Joe's navigator is out of luck again and is shot by the machine gunners at the towers. Both prisoners manage to cross the bridge gate and split up in 2 different directions. The helicopters only follow Jensen, hoping to stop him. Case agrees to help with the last part of the plan. She feels guilty about Frank and doesn't want to lose another driver she's become attached to. Plus, she also has her release papers with her, which will make her escape perfectly legal. Jensen drives his car into the parking lot with tall machinery, which blocks the view of his pursuers, and jumps out of the car on the move. Case takes his place behind the wheel. The girl manages to steer the choppers away before she is stopped by a wall of fire. She puts on Frankenstein's mask and climbs out onto the roof of the car to surrender. All eyes are on her, and the racers complete their escape by climbing into a freight train car. They arrange to meet in Miami after Jensen picks up his daughter. Ulrich returns to Hennessy and happily reports that Frankenstein has been returned to base, and the show's ratings have broken all records. In honor of their success, someone even sent the boss a congratulatory gift. Coach has taken his long-awaited revenge. 6 months later, Joe and Jensen are fiddling with cars in a shared workshop. They have started a new life in Mexico, where they are visited by Case, who has finally secured her release. Jensen has regained custody of his daughter and introduces her to his race partner. The filmmakers carefully worked on the stunts to make them look as realistic as possible. There really was a death race on the set. No people were injured in it, but many awesome cars were damaged. 34 cars were used in the filming, with 85 auto mechanics working on them at all times. Each of the cars cost the creators of the film $250,000, and their re-equipment and assembly took more than a month. To film gunfire, they used blanks, totaling in at least 4 tons of ammunition. As always, look for the name of the movie in the video description. In the meantime, let us know in the comments, did you catch how many of Joe's navigators died in the movie? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video, so more awesome stories come out as often as possible.